you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be?
Does one of us have to come out alive?
We were in high school. I'd take you behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
For years, Democrats have stood on their moral high ground, pointing fingers and screaming about Trump being a threat to democracy, dangerous, a fascist, the worst president in history who needed to be impeached not once but twice. They made speeches, they cried on camera, they told you Trump was inciting violence while cities burned behind them. But what if their entire narrative was built on a mountain of lies and hypocrisy? What if there was video proof showing Democrats doing the exact things they condemned Trump for? And worse, that is exactly what Trump attorney David Schoen did during the second impeachment trial. He walked into that Senate chamber with a nuclear weapon, receipts, cold, hard video evidence of Democrats' own words coming back to haunt them. And when he pressed play, you could see the panic wash over their faces as their carefully crafted narrative collapsed in real time. The mainstream media buried these clips. They cut away when Schoen started playing them. They did everything in their power to make sure you never saw the devastating evidence that exposed their darling Democrats as the hypocrites they truly are. But today, we are going to show you exactly what they tried to hide. Before we dive into the explosive clips that left Democrats squirming in their seats, you need to understand what was really happening in that Senate chamber. This was never about justice or protecting democracy. This was about one thing only: making sure Donald Trump could never run for office again. The Democrats' strategy was simple but ruthless. First, secure a conviction on the charge of inciting an insurrection, which required 67 votes in the Senate. Then once that passed, bring a separate measure to bar Trump from ever running for office again, which only needed a simple majority. This was not about healing the nation. This was a political assassination. But to make their plan work, they needed that conviction. They needed to convince Republican senators that Trump was uniquely dangerous, that his words directly caused January 6th, and that he alone was responsible for the violence that day. This is where David Schoen, one of Trump's attorneys, decided to tear their entire case to shreds with their own words. What Schoen revealed next silenced the room, not with clever legal arguments or constitutional debates, but with something far more powerful: video after video of Democrats calling for Trump's impeachment from the moment he took office. Not for any specific crime, not for any proven wrongdoing, but simply because they hated him and wanted him gone. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable.
I want to say this for Donald Trump, who I may well be voting to impeach.
Donald Trump's already done a number of things which legitimately raise the question of impeachment.
I don't respect this president, and I will fight every day until he is impeached.
That is grounds to start impeachment proceedings.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
I continue to say, impeach him! Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
And then, the most revealing clip of all. When asked if she would vote to impeach, one Democrat proudly declared,
"Because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach the mother."
This was not about January 6th. This was about a 4-year vendetta, a political witch hunt that began before Trump even placed his hand on the Bible. The second impeachment was just the culmination of a plan they had been working on since election night 2016. But Schoen was just warming up. The Democrats had spent weeks portraying Trump's rhetoric as uniquely dangerous, claiming his words directly incited violence. So Schoen decided to play a little game called Who Said It, and what came next left Democrats frozen in their seats, unable to look at each other as their own violent rhetoric boomed through the Senate chamber. Here are the words Democrats did not want you to hear. I just do not even know why there are not uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be. There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there is unrest in our lives. You got to be ready to throw a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch. Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face. I thought he should have punched him in the face. I feel like punching him. I would like to take him behind the gym if I were in high school. When was the last time an actor assassinated a president? They are still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump. Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful. I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House. And when asked which Republican leader she would prefer to be stuck in an elevator with, Hillary Clinton chillingly replied, "Does one of us have to come out alive?" That is not political rhetoric. That is not protected speech. That is incitement in its purest form, coming from the very people who were now sitting in judgment of Donald Trump. This pattern of hypocrisy did not stop with mere words. When cities across America burned during the summer of 2020, with rioters attacking federal buildings, destroying small businesses, and causing billions in damage, how did Democrats respond? Did they call for peace? Did they condemn the violence? Schoen had those receipts too. As buildings collapsed in flames behind reporters, as small business owners wept over their destroyed livelihoods, as federal officers were assaulted night after night, here is what Democratic leaders said. Nancy Pelosi shrugged it off with, "People are going to do what they are going to do." Kamala Harris enthusiastically declared, "This is a movement. I am telling you, they are not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they are not going to stop. They are not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they are not going to stop after." Maxine Waters insisted, destroying property which can be replaced is not violence. Meanwhile, CNN reporters stood in front of burning buildings and called the riots heartwarming and mostly peaceful protests. The message was clear. Violence is acceptable when it serves their political agenda. Attacking government buildings is fine when they are not the buildings Democrats work in. Threatening public officials is appropriate when those officials are not Democrats. But the most devastating evidence was yet to come. After years of portraying Trump and his supporters as threats to democracy for questioning election results, Schoen revealed that Democrats had done the exact same thing in 2017, objecting to the certification of Electoral College votes for Trump. The video evidence was damning. "I have an objection because 10 of the 29 electoral votes cast by Florida were cast by electors not lawfully certified. I object to the certificate from the state of Georgia on the grounds that the electoral votes were not lawfully certified. I object to the certificate from the state of Alabama. The electors were not lawfully certified. I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina because of the massive voter suppression and the closing of polling booths." Jamie Raskin, the very congressman leading the impeachment charge against Trump, was shown objecting to Florida's electoral votes just 3 days after taking office in 2017. The same man who claimed it was sedition when Republicans questioned the 2020 election had himself tried to block Trump's victory in 2016. The only difference? In 2017, no Democratic senator joined the House objections, so they could not be formally debated, but the intent was identical: to delegitimize an election they lost. The Senate chamber fell silent as these clips played. Democrats who moments earlier had been nodding along to emotional speeches about protecting democracy now stared at the floor, unable to meet each other's eyes as their hypocrisy was laid bare for the world to see. This was not politics as usual. This was a public execution of the Democrats' entire case. With each video clip, their moral authority crumbled further. With each damning statement from their own mouths, their credibility evaporated. And what makes this even more infuriating is that nothing has changed. The same Democrats who called for uprisings, who endorsed violence, who tried to overturn an election in 2017, are still using the exact same playbook today. They are still portraying their opponents as existential threats while engaging in the very behavior they condemn. When Charlie Kirk is attacked, they look the other way. When pro-life offices are firebombed, they shrug. When a man with a gun is arrested outside Justice Kavanaugh's home, they change the subject. The rules only apply when they benefit Democrats. Now let me be crystal clear about something. January 6th was wrong. Violence is not the answer, regardless of which side commits it. Breaking into the Capitol was inexcusable, just as burning down police stations and federal courthouses was inexcusable during the summer of 2020. But that is exactly the point. If we are going to have standards in this country, they must apply equally to everyone. If inciting violence is wrong when Trump does it, it is wrong when Maxine Waters does it. If questioning election results is a threat to democracy when Republicans do it, it is a threat when Democrats do it. What David Schoen exposed was not just Democratic hypocrisy, but a fundamental threat to equal justice under law. A two-tiered system where your political affiliation determines whether your actions are condemned or celebrated, where identical behavior is either sedition or patriotism, depending on which party you belong to. The most powerful moment in Schoen's presentation came when he juxtaposed two crises, the Capitol breach and the nationwide riots of 2020. Both involved attacks on government buildings. Both resulted in deaths and injuries. Both stemmed from political grievances. Yet the response could not have been more different. For one, we saw the full weight of federal law enforcement, hundreds of prosecutions, a special congressional committee, and non-stop media coverage. For the other, we saw charges dropped, bail funds promoted by Democratic officials, and media coverage that ranged from sympathetic to celebratory. The riots that raged for months across America caused over $2 billion in damage. They left dozens dead, including retired police captain David Dorn. They destroyed countless small businesses, many owned by minorities and immigrants who lost everything they had built. But as cities burned, CNN literally ran the caption, "Fiery but mostly peaceful protests," over footage of buildings engulfed in flames. MSNBC called the destruction the language of the unheard. Democratic lawmakers like Ayanna Pressley insisted that there needs to be unrest in the streets. This was not journalism. This was not leadership. This was political arson, encouraging violence while pretending to stand for peace. The truth that emerged from those Senate hearings should shake every American to their core. We were not witnessing a principled stand for democracy. We were watching political theater designed to eliminate a potential opponent before he could run again. And the most disturbing part, they almost got away with it. If David Schoen had not come armed with those video clips, if he had not forced Democrats to face their own words and actions, the narrative would have gone unchallenged. The media would have reported only one side of the story, as they so often do. This is why they were so desperate to keep you from seeing these clips. This is why networks cut away when Schoen began playing them. This is why these videos were buried, while endless footage of January 6th was played on a loop for months. They know that their entire moral authority collapses when their hypocrisy is exposed. They know that Americans are fair-minded people who recognize a double standard when they see one. And most of all, they know that once you see these clips, you can never unsee them. So where does this leave us? With a simple but powerful truth, the easiest way to expose a Democrat is to roll tape of their own past statements. There is never a shortage of contradictions to pull from because their positions shift depending on what is politically advantageous at any given moment. When objecting to election results helps them, it is a defense of democracy. When it hurts them, it is an insurrection. When riots advance their agenda, they are mostly peaceful protests. When riots damage their interests, they are domestic terrorism. When they lose power, resistance is patriotic. When they hold power, resistance is sedition. This is not governance. This is not leadership. This is naked political opportunism dressed up in the language of principle. And it relies entirely on your willingness to forget what they said yesterday when they tell you something different today. This pattern extends far beyond impeachment. We see it in every major issue facing our country, on crime, on immigration, on energy, on free speech. The positions change, but the hypocrisy remains constant. Democrats who once claimed kids in cages was a human rights atrocity now oversee a border crisis where children are packed into facilities at several times their capacity. Democrats who demanded we believe all women suddenly develop nuanced views on due process when allegations touch their political allies. Democrats who insisted Trump was threatening democracy by criticizing the press now openly call for censorship of views they disagree with. The only consistent principle is power, obtaining it, maintaining it, and wielding it against their opponents. Everything else is negotiable, including the values they claim to hold sacred. David Schoen's presentation did more than just defend his client. It held up a mirror to our political system and revealed an ugly truth. Much of what passes for principle in Washington is merely pretense. Much of what is portrayed as moral outrage is simply political calculation. The impeachment trial was never about protecting democracy. It was about eliminating a political threat. It was never about healing the nation. It was about settling scores. And it was never about justice. It was about power. By playing those clips, Schoen forced Americans to confront a reality many would prefer to ignore, that our political discourse has become detached from truth, consistency, and principle, that we are increasingly governed not by the rule of law, but by the rule of whoever has power at the moment. This should concern every American, regardless of political affiliation, because a system where standards apply differently based on party loyalty is not a republic. It is not a democracy. It is a form of political tribalism that threatens the very foundations of our constitutional order. When politicians can openly call for violence against their opponents, then feign outrage when similar rhetoric comes from the other side, we have lost something precious. When the same action can be either patriotic or seditious depending solely on who performs it, we have abandoned equal justice under law. The clips David Schoen played did not just expose Democratic hypocrisy. They exposed a rot at the core of our political culture, a willingness to abandon principle for advantage, a readiness to condemn in others what we excuse in ourselves, and most dangerously, a growing belief that the ends justify the means. These are the clips Democrats prayed you would never see, the evidence that destroys their carefully constructed narrative of moral superiority, the proof that their outrage is selective and their principles flexible. Now that you have seen them, you cannot unsee them. You cannot pretend the hypocrisy does not exist. You cannot accept at face value the next expression of moral outrage, the next claim of unprecedented danger, the next assertion that this time, unlike all the times before, they are acting purely on principle rather than political advantage. If this breakdown of political hypocrisy opened your eyes, hit that subscribe button right now. We are committed to showing you what the mainstream media tries to hide, to playing the clips they do not want you to see, to exposing the double standards that corrupt our public discourse. Because truth is not partisan. Principles should not change depending on who is in power, and the American people deserve leaders whose words and actions align, who apply the same standards to themselves that they demand of others. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep thinking for yourself. It is the only way to cut through the hypocrisy and find the truth in our increasingly divided nation.